Wait, is this thing on? How do I look? Oh, what is up, everybody? Mr. Purtis here. Welcome to topic 3.4, land-based empires, 1450 to 1750. This is the fourth land-based empire that we talked about. These guys are going to be known as the Qing Dynasty, oftentimes also known as the Manchu Dynasty. We're going to refer to them primarily as the Qing, but I'll get into a little bit here of why they are. I was so excited I wore my suit today for this video because, you know, we're talking about the Qing. Why wouldn't I? So here's the deal. Little background on this. From 1644 to 1911, the Qing Dynasty are going to be in power. You're going to be asking yourself, because I know you are, because you know the deal here, Mr. Purtis, what is the contextualization to set up the Manchu Empire, aka the Qing Dynasty? Great question. Here's what we got. The Manchus are going to come from this area to the north of what was known as Ming China. They are from an area called Manchuria. It's just north of the Korean Peninsula here. The people who live there are not ethnically Chinese. They are Manchurian. They come in and they are not sedentary people. They're not nomadic. They are sedentary people, and they're going to come in and be the second non-ethnically Chinese group to rule over China. The first one was obviously everyone's favorite, the Mongols, and they're going to come down and invade and conquer. So, as you already know, I don't even know why I need to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The Qing Dynasty is going to be able to expand because of gunpowder. They have cannons, they have guns. That gunpowder originally started and was invented in China. It makes its way around the world and kind of comes back into China in the form of an explosive that you can really harness by using guns and cannons, but you already know this. So what allows them to really take over is, one, this access to guns and gunpowder, and allows them to expand, but also the previous dynasty in power, which was the Ming Dynasty, which you might remember from unit number 2, and the exploration of a man by the name of Zheng He, whose real pronunciation is Zheng He, and Zheng He goes out under the guidance of the emperor at the time of the Ming Dynasty, and he goes out and reestablishes tributary states. Well, after they reestablish this, again, this is contextualization. They reestablish these tributary states. They bring the tribute back, and they isolate themselves. By isolate, I mean they're just really looking inward. They do still trade with other places, but that trade is very limited. And when the Europeans come in the 1600s looking for silk and porcelain and all the wonderful things that East Asia has to offer, the Ming Dynasty find that the Europeans have a resource that they want, which is silver, which is coming from the Americas, and that silver is going to come in at large rates and lead to hyper or almost inflation in Ming China. And as a result, the Ming Dynasty is going to start collapsing, leading to the Qing taking over and claiming the Mandate of Heaven. The Manchus come in. They use a Chinese dynasty name. They keep the Mandate of Heaven because that's what's just the way to go about it. So what they're going to do is, so the way that they govern, remember, we're talking about, one, how they expand. And by the way, before I keep going, silly me, this right here was the Ming Empire, or the Ming Dynasty. This pink is the Qing. You can see a crazy increase in land. A lot of this is desert, but as you get here into Tibet, formerly the home of the Dalai Lama, and then we got areas out here really very sparsely populated, but still we see expansion. In terms of governing the Qing Empire, remember, we're looking at 5 different ways, and we're going to look at these and compare them to some of the other regions. Number 1, government structure. They're going to keep some old ideas in China, ideas that have been around forever. You don't want to come in, if you're a minority group in a country, and totally change the system. You're going to make a lot of people not so happy. And if you want to maintain your power, you don't want to make people not so happy. So they're going to keep some ideas. They're going to keep the idea of a centralized government. They're going to keep the ideas of an emperor. They're going to keep the ideas of the Mandate of Heaven. They're going to keep the ideas of the Confucian exam system with a bureaucracy. And they're going to keep the same idea of the social class structure that's been in China forever. Except, of course, you got to put yourself as the Manchus on top of this social class pyramid. You are going to keep the scholars towards the top. Remember, the Mongols put them at the bottom. The Ming bring them back up. The Manchus keep them up on top. So we're going to avoid those mistakes of the Mongols by putting the scholars on the bottom and having them upset. So for the most part, we're keeping things very similar government structure-wise, but we're just coming in and importing ourselves, importing, not the right word, but we're going to come in and bring ourselves in and put ourselves on top. We're happy. For the most part, the Chinese are relatively accepting because we're keeping a lot of the similar traditions and we're not changing too much. In terms of monumental art and architecture, we really don't see the same type of architecture in China as we do in the other places that we've talked about. The other places we talked about are really big into palaces and these huge buildings to kind of show off power. In the Ming, one of the main things that they're really into is monumental art. So we have a lot of these what are called imperial portraits, which are very intricate. These are not the best quality coming up here, but we do have portraits of leaders in China to try and show off their power, show their glory. This is more of the traditional Chinese art at the time, very much landscape, kind of one with nature, almost like a Taoist or Buddhist centered, where the people are not the focus, which makes this even more significant that we do have a picture where people are the focus, because this is what a lot of what Chinese art at the time would have looked like, huge landscape picture. So that's one. We also have the military. So how are we going to recruit people? I know you know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We're going to have the civil service exam. It's going to be based on Confucius ideas, writings of people who wrote after Confucius and interpreted and brought his ideas more into a more modern sense. So any kind of commentary on his writing or any writing that helps further explain kind of answers to or comments on more modern issues that Confucius didn't have to deal with in 200 BCE. Anyone was allowed to take the civil service exam under Qing China. The issue is, though, under the Qing Dynasty, you really need to be educated to pass this test. We're talking like, it's really, really hard to pass this. We're talking like the elite of the elite of the elite. And if you want to work in like the centralized government, we're talking like the top, like 0.01% of the people. However, the jobs that you could get by passing this test could range. It could be someone in the military, you could be a police commissioner, tax collector, but everyone had to pass this test. And kind of the higher you scored, the better your possibility of advancement in jobs. But everything was based on, really, this focus here is a word called meritocracy, that's based on your merit and how you personally do, and a less connection to what we see in some other places at this time, which is more based on family ties or relationships. There were 3 different levels of tests. Each one got harder. So you would start with like kind of the intro level, and then the medium, and then the hard. And this is not something that's given all the time. Really, under the Qing, we're seeing 2 tests per year. Cheating was rampant, so they actually make it, you can imagine, there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot of filial piety, family honor that you would bring to this by passing it. So people would try and figure out all different ways to cheat, which we'll talk more about in class, because who doesn't like learning about people cheating on tests back in the 1700s in China. So that's the way people entered the government, which I know you know already, but I'm just telling you again, because why not? Also, you need to tax people. Taxes are needed to provide all the services that people need. You need a military, you need the roads, you need all kinds of stuff. So in China, under the Qing, taxes are going to be paid in copper or silver coins. Most other places at this time are really focused on farm products. We have a strong standardized currency. We've had it in China since really we've gone back to Unit 1 when we talked about the Song Dynasty. So really this coin currency helps merchants. Like, as we've talked about in the past, standardized currency allows people to trade easier. You don't need to barter and negotiate. Hey, I'll trade you this key for, the Hess truck or whatever. We don't have to do that anymore. What we're doing now is we're really focused on using this currency to pay for goods, and we know that the currency, because it is produced and stamped essentially by the government of China, that it is a standard currency that we can trust. So, of course, people are going to have counterfeit currency, which still exists today, but in this case, it makes things easier to collect taxes. It makes things easier for merchants to trade, and everything is fantastic. So that's the main goal. That's how the taxation is. Last but not least is how we treat minority groups. Remember, weird situation, similar to which empire that we talked about? I'll give you a second. That's 1 second. The Mughal Empire, where you have a minority group ruling over the majority. So the question becomes, it says similar to Mughals right there. Answer given. So the question becomes, how do you do this? The Manchus only make up 2% of the population in the entire country or in the entire empire. So, like I said, you're going to keep a lot of the old Chinese ways in terms of the government structure, but you need to still feel like you're in power, and you can't allow, the goal would be not to lose your Manchu ways, and to not allow the ethnically Chinese people to feel like they're superior to you, because you, as the Manchus, only 2%, may have a little bit of an inferiority complex. So what you need to do is you need to find a way to have some type of difference, and to make those differences pronounced, even though we're incorporating some ideas. So what they do is there's a couple ways they do it. Number one, they ban intermarriage between Manchus and ethnically Chinese people. So it's illegal to get married. Now, do some people end up trying to secretly get married? Do people fall in love? I'm sure it happened, but it was illegal to get married and have that marriage sanctioned by the government. Number two, anybody who wrote or any books that existed or any writings that existed that were against Manchus and Manchuria, they were purged. They were destroyed. So you get rid of any writing that's negative to the Manchus. Last, we're going to force all Chinese men to wear a new hairstyle, which I like to call the hardcore mullet, but back then the real term for it is the Q hairstyle. And essentially what you do is you force the males to shave their head in the front here, back to the back of their ear, and then have a long hair that you braid into a ponytail. And that was a way, that's a typical kind of a Manchu style that they're going to force the Chinese to wear. So we see this Q, that's how it's pronounced, Q-U-E-U-E, is Q. This would have been the more Ming Dynasty way, and then eventually when we get into modern China, we see kind of the modern kind of Western haircut. But that's the way to subjugate or keep people down. Anyway, that's what I got. I'm so glad I dressed up. I feel good. Any questions? As always, write it down. Let me know. I'm out.